Thanks for tuning into Electric Bike Journal. If you just ordered a bike and it was shipped to you in one of these boxes, you're probably wondering, how do I put this thing together? Well, I'm gonna walk you through the assembly process on a bike from out of the box to ready to ride, and along the way, share some safety details to go over to ensure a very good first ride. Now this first step is pretty self-explanatory. It's getting the bike out of the box. So you're gonna cut the tape. This one has big cardboard staples in it, and they might have even glued that upper piece of the lid together to help the box keep its form. So we're gonna go ahead and pop this open and start pulling the pieces out. Now with the lid open, you can see the bike and everything that's inside of it, and there's gonna be a few loose items in there. This one has the charger box on top, easy to get to, and everything else seems to be down low below the bike, so I can go ahead and pull the bike out of the box. And I'm gonna throw it into a work stand here to work on it, but I'm not gonna do that quite yet, and it's not something that you need in order to put a bike together. We just happen to have a Feedback Sports one, and I'm gonna use it because it makes it a little bit easier for me so I don't have to bend over. All right, now you got your bike out of the box and it's safely placed somewhere kind of out of your work area. Go ahead and dive in there, pull the rest of the stuff out and set those aside because you don't want to trip over anything. I like to use the box for all the packaging material. Just helps keep the workspace organized and clean, and I know that all of that's gonna go out to the recycle at the end. So not a full step, but a suggestion upon actually putting a bike together. So we're gonna go ahead and get this ready and start assembling the bike. Now with the bike out of the box, you've accomplished step one. Now it's on to step two, and that's gonna be cutting those zip ties and pulling all the padding off of the bike and putting the front wheel aside so you can get it ready to start putting the seat and seat post into the frame, installing the handlebars, and put that front wheel on there. Now this step may not apply to everyone, but in our case, the seat post and the seat are not pre-assembled. So if you're wondering how to do that and which direction the seat needs to go on that seat post, you're gonna put the seat on this way with the hardware and kind of that neck of the seat post facing the rear of the bike, and that will go in there like that. Now with the seat on the seat post, this seat post is dry, and I'm gonna go ahead and grab my grease and throw a little grease on there before I put it into the frame. This just helps it not stick over time to allow me to be able to raise it and lower it if I need to in the future. All right, we're all greased up, and this is where you probably need your first tool if you didn't need a tool to put the seat onto the seat post itself. So now it's greased, I'm gonna go ahead and go down to my seat post clamp. Some of you may have a quick release, and it's just a lever that you can pull. This bike uses a hex bolt style clamp, so we're gonna need that wrench to loosen it up. And go ahead and throw that seat post in there, just in a rough area because I'm gonna be putting it into the bike stand. And when I tighten this up, keep in mind that you want it snug and tight, but it's a small bolt and that means small torque. So you don't wanna overdo it. As long as it doesn't slide or twist around on you, then you know it's tight enough, but don't overdo it because you will break a bolt. And that's not a great way to start putting your bike together. All right, well, I got the bike in the stand so it's easier for you to see. Again, not a necessary step, just something that we have available, so we're gonna use it. Well, I got the rest of this padding on here that I need to pull off, so we're gonna go ahead and get that out of the way and move on to the handlebars. All right, all the padding removed, all your zip ties out of the way, everything is loose and free. Now it's time to install your handlebars. Some of you, again, this step may be done already and you just need to turn them sideways and maybe adjust the roll a little bit for you. For us, the handlebars are fully off, so I'm gonna use a 4mm hex to loosen up the front of that stem and put those handlebars on. Putting handlebars on the stem, I like to kind of go bottom corner and upper opposite corner, so you kind of cross over. It makes it easier to get that clamp on there to hold the bars and not have to worry about it falling down when you drop another bolt. All right, well, we got all the bolts into that stem there. The handlebars are still a little loose, and most of the time there are little measurement guides on the front of the handlebar that you can kind of see from a window in the stem, and this just helps you center it up on the bars and kind of get you in a static zero position to then come back to later and adjust side to side and your roll. Once it's in place, you can tighten everything down. And again, small bolts, so small pressure. You don't want to over tighten anything. There are torque specs generally for most bikes and how tight you should do those things. The rule of thumb is just nice and snug And again, little bolts, you don't want to break them. All right, well that's pretty snug in there. They're not turning on me, so I know we're in a good start. Seat's on. Last thing you gotta do is throw the front wheel on, put the battery in, and then we'll get into the final steps on assembling your bike, some of the safety things you need to check before you go out for that first ride. We're gonna turn to the grease one more time here and put some on that front skewer that needs to go into the front hub of the front wheel. And I like to put grease on there just to make it slide in and out the easiest way. Helps with rolling and it helps for removal in the future. Now with the front wheel on, handlebars and the seat installed, this bike is almost there. We have pedals and a battery to install and the bike will be fully assembled. From there is when you start making your tuning adjustments, making sure your brakes are working, everything's rolling the right way, you're shifting the right gears, and start lining things up for you, getting that seat the right spot, adjusting your handlebars. And those are finer tuned detail things that we'll explain how to set those up in a future video. For now, we'll go through those last finishing touches to get you out riding the best way possible. We're gonna throw those pedals in right now. If you're wondering how to do that, or you feel like you're just sitting there and spinning and not threading in, we have a full how to install pedals video here on the channel. But in short, one of the pedals will be reverse thread, and that's the pedal that goes on the left side of the bike. And when snugging up your pedals, it's nice and snug and no need to be Arnold Schwarzenegger and get them too tight. They're not gonna go too far, but you don't want them to come loose either. Well, in our case, Propeller ships the battery separate from the bike in its own packaging. It might already be installed for you, but if not, they're pretty easy to install. This one has the plug at the bottom, a nice latch mechanism up top. So you'll just kind of line that up, push it in, there you go, battery installed that quickly. All right, well now we've covered how to fully assemble a bike from front to rear. Everything's installed where it needs to be. This is where assembling your own bike gets into the more focused details. And you wanna make sure things are working appropriately. I like to start with the derailleur and then move on to the wheels and the brakes. After everything's tuned, it's shifting properly, the brakes aren't rubbing and they're lined up the right way, that's where I'll start sizing and fitting the bike, putting the seat at the right height and the seat at the right angle, and getting the right roll on the handlebars for me. Well, if you ordered a new bike and it's a multi-speed like this one, with a rear derailleur, you're gonna wanna make sure that it shifts through all those gears and that the stops are set. If they aren't, there's more detailed video to show how to calibrate and set your derailleur. But for the most part, when ordering a new bike, that should already be done from the manufacturer. You just wanna go through and double check, just in case something happened in shipping. Now with the rear end shifting through all those gears, nice and smooth, and the rear brake not dragging and working right, we're gonna move on to that front wheel. And up front, we notice it doesn't really spin, so that caliper is going to need to be repositioned on the rotor. But before you get into loosening anything and moving anything from where it's at, make sure the wheel's on there straight. If you're working on this on the ground, just loosen up that axle, get the bike upright, and tighten it back down. To back off those pads from each other on mechanical brakes, these tourney brakes specifically have a hex bolt that pushes pressure on the internal pad towards the rotor. And when you pull the lever and pull that cable, you're pulling the outside pad towards the rotor and therefore pinching it. So we're gonna back off that inside one because it's the fixed one and see if that helps at all. 4 clicks, helped a lot, but there still is a little bit of rub and there's a lot of pull on that. So we're gonna go ahead and loosen up that post and move that caliper around. Now with a little bit of slack there on the caliper to let it move freely, you're gonna wanna make sure we have a little bit of tension on our cable. So if we over tighten it, we can loosen it up some just by adjusting the cable tension. But I'm gonna pull it out a little bit so I have a few threads showing there, which gives me room to continue to go tighter, but also to loosen it up. From there, we're gonna go ahead and walk that outer pad in to where it pinches down. And you got a nice rub going. Maybe back it out a couple clicks. So right here, we can see it's rubbing a little because it's not tight, but things are still loose, a little loose down there. I'm gonna grab that brake lever, hold it down nice and snug. Go ahead and tighten up your caliper back onto the fork. Give it a little spin around. We have good brake pull there. I'm gonna back off that inner pad just a little bit. There we go. Nice functioning front brake. If you're looking for a video to fully dial in your brakes, whether they be hydraulic or mechanical disc brakes, there'll be a whole video on that shortly. In the meantime, do a quick search online and it'll render a lot of really good results with a lot of tips on how to do this. For the meantime, it is shifting fine, the brakes are working, everything's doing what it needs to do. Lets you pull it off of the rack, get it down on the ground, and start getting things set up like your seat height and your handlebar roll. Now we'll grab that 4mm hex wrench, come back to our seat clamp. For us, it's a 4mm. For you, it might be different, or a quick release, and we'll get that seat kind of at a nice starting point on our height and tighten that back down nice and straight. Now we're gonna grab the appropriate wrench to come back to our seat clamp on the top of the seat post there that holds the seat to the seat post, and loosen that up so we have some playroom to adjust it. And a good starting point to start with your seat is level and on center. From there, after riding it, you'll be able to fine tune the adjustments for the angle, the height, how far forward, how far back, and really get it dialed just for you. All right, well, now it's time to line up your stem and your handlebars to get everything straight. If your stem is crooked and your handlebars are not lined up with your front wheel, you're gonna loosen up those hex bolts and straighten things out, tighten them back down. Again, remember, small bolts, small pressure. You don't wanna over tighten it and snap things. Those aren't ones that you wanna have to dig out. I'm gonna grab our 4mm again, loosen up those bolts just a pinch. They're gonna be opposite sides on this one. That gives me enough room to kind of move things around a little bit. All right, with the stems straight, handlebars are straight, the roll feels pretty good at neutral there without going for a longer ride to know. I'm gonna jump over to aligning my levers and the shifter to get those in the right spot. Right now, the left side one for the front brake is kicked up versus the rear brake, which is kicked down. I'm gonna wanna get those to match for one and to get them in the right spot for me that's comfortable. So what I'll do is I'll step back onto the bike here. And a good rule of thumb to start with your brake lever position is that angle you want to have create a kind of more straight line. So over here on the left side, it's kicked up, so it kind of kinks my wrist and my hand, which will make it a little awkward for grabbing the brake. And then likewise, if they're too far down, kind of wraps your wrist over, and that doesn't set you up for a good braking position. So this one needs to come down just a hair, and this one will have to follow to match. When lining this all up, you're gonna have to loosen kind of a few things to get them free and out of the way for you to get to all the hardware. And every different brake has a different style setup. All right, so now that you know kind of where those levers need to go, I'm gonna also be moving mine in because larger hands on this bike, and I don't wanna be pinching my knuckles when I pull the brake in. So go back to your seated position, kind of line everything up. I'm gonna have to slide those in a little bit, and that seems like a good spot to start out. Again, we're getting things snug and not too tight to break anything. I like to make sure that the brakes are just loose enough to that if I crash, that they will spin on impact, but not loose enough to where they spin when I grab them. Well, now that your handlebars are all set up for you, go ahead and line up the rest of your controls there to make sure that you can reach everything safely, and you're good to go. Well, if you've been watching this and assembling your own bike at the same time, congratulations, you've done it. If you're watching this ahead of time, about to go out to the garage or waiting for that bike to show up in the mail, hopefully you're ready to put that together. Overall, putting this specific bike together, I used 3 tools, a couple different hex wrenches and those cable cutters to get the zip ties off. All basic things, and this bike itself did come with a little multi-tool in the packaging, which is something that's really great that brands are starting to do, is to offer the tools that you're gonna need to go out and ride this bike. Thank you so much for watching, And if you have any questions about bike assembly or bike maintenance, leave those down below. We're gonna continue to grow this series and show you how to take care of your bike and the things necessary and the tools you'll need to make that happen, to do it the right way. Thanks again for watching, and happy riding.